with over 50 years dedicated to public service and now helping to guide Gibraltar into yet another interesting chapter. Please welcome on stage the former Chief Minister of Gibraltar and current Father of the House, Sir Joe Bossano.
Thank you. I'm going to talk to you today about who am I? Now, that might seem a strange thing to do, but I'm going to talk about myself, which I've never done before, and I've always talked about all the things I've been involved in doing. So, if somebody said, who is Joe Bossano? Then you could say, well, look, he's the Minister for Economic Development. And if the question had been asked in 1988, you might have said, well, he's the Chief Minister. And of course, if you had asked it in the early 60s, you could have said, he is the sweeper of Romford Road in West Ham in East London, because that's what I was doing then. So all those things is not who I am. It is things that I have done. And one of the things, I believe that we are the result of our DNA. And not just us as humans, not just our species, but every living organism comes with a recipe that enables life to produce a certain shape of living organism with certain abilities that help the organism stay alive. And that is true of us. And therefore, that is the fingerprint. That is what each of us has. And I believe it is the dominant part that makes us behave in the way we do. And that culture is a very small proportion by comparison. So when I was in school, in the grammar school, one of the problems that I found in dealing with the situation that I was there was that I have certain things that I not just cannot do well, I cannot do at all, because of the way I am wired. And I can't draw, so I couldn't, in the art classes, whatever it was that I was supposed to be painting there, well, the finished product always looked the same. So, and then when it came to sport, every time in all the sports I tried, by the time I had taken a decision of where I used to had to kick the ball was not there anymore. It had gone somewhere else. And then when it came to culture, it was more of the same. So the Christian brothers had very strong views on education. And therefore, they thought I was being bullshit, which was not true. And the way they dealt with people who were bullshit was that they gave them the strap. They gave me a lot of strap. And of course, the predictable result was that I wasn't bullshit when they started, but I was bullshit by the time they finished. And therefore, at the end, they gave up on me, and I didn't have to do sports, I didn't have to art, and I didn't have to do culture, I didn't have to listen to music or any of the things. And much later, when I was in the Merchant Navy, I signed up to do a contract in the Merchant Navy for 4 years. And in those days, for example, my first trip was to Australia, which took 3 months. And when you are at sea working, you work 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, and then you got 16 hours. And most of my mates on the ship, in those 16 hours, they would gamble, get drunk, and fight each other. And none of those three options were particularly attractive. So what I did instead was I read and I thought and I educated myself in almost everything that I could get my hands on. And there was a guy called Jose, uh, who as a Spanish uh, Jose Delgado, Spanish scientist, who was doing uh, um, uh, investigations. He did it in the United States and in Spain, in mapping the areas of the brain and identifying what they did by the reactions that he got. And he came out with a paper explaining this, which I read, and it made a huge impact on me because I began to understand how I was. And what he had done was he identified the area where uh, the reaction of pleasure is registered in the brain. And what he did was he stimulated that area by uh, using an electrical impulse. And then the students that he had been using, which probably wouldn't be allowed in nowadays, had to explain what it was that they had experienced, right? And one would say, well, look, I had a beautiful meal. And the other one said, well, I had drunk a fine wine. And another one would say, I saw a beautiful painting. And another said, I was with my girlfriend and having a lovely time in bed with the person I love. And they all came out saying different things. But of course, that is not what was happening. What was happening was that somebody was tickling a part of their brain with an electrical prompt. And this is immensely important philosophically, because what is reality? What is reality when all the things that people thought was happening was not really happening? So here you have the way, the subjectivity of the way we view things in life. Now, it so happens that I think something is wrong with my pleasure center. So when people says to me, what color do you like? I said, what does it mean to like a color? I mean, how can you like a color or not like it? Color is color. And color, by the way, is quite an interesting explanation, because what you have with color is that light, we all know, it can split up into the colors that we see in the rainbow. And what happens is that when the light touches an object, the chemistry of that object either absorbs the light or reflects it. So if something is red, it means that the chemistry of that is something that reflects light on the red part of the spectrum, but not the rest. Therefore, you've got at one extreme something that is black, that absorbs all the light and reflects nothing. On the other side, something that reflects all the light, which is white, and absorbs nothing. And in the middle, you got the. So this is a scientific explanation. This is what my brain understands. But my brain does not understand how you can like one or another bit of a spectrum. And the same is true with music. I mean, I am clear that there is no such thing as music. There is sound. And of course, if you like the sound, you call it music. And if you don't like it, you call it noise. And I can prove it, because there was a time when people like the Beatles were said to be making noise. And then a few years later, everybody thought it wasn't noise anymore, it was music. So it's a cultural thing, not reality. That is not reality. And therefore, thinking is reality. But you can say, well, okay, but thinking is doing the same as the examples that I have given. But there is another type of thinking. There was in the 18th century, a French philosopher, Descartes, said in Latin, which is was used to be the language of knowledge at one stage in our civilization, cogito ergo sum. I think, and therefore I am. Now, there are two ways of looking at thinking. The ways that I have explained is a response to something that is happening outside you, and you are reacting to it. But look, that is the same as stopping a car because there is a traffic light that goes red. So there is an impulse that reaches your brain, and then your brain, if you got one that isn't like mine, will have a cultural response. And that culture is what, uh, uh, if you like, manages what you think and you evaluate, and it's a nice thing or a bad thing, or you like it or you don't like it. But the other thing about the brain is that the brain defines the fact that you exist. And until now, we think that we are the only ones who have that concept of self consciousness, the consciousness, the knowledge that you exist, and the knowledge that you're human. And therefore, we think all the other animals are not like us. We made it wrong because we keep on finding that animals have emotions, that they can get, we have, if we have animals that are close to humans, they finish up behaving in like humans, the good side of humans on the background. And they show affection, and there's lots of stories of pets being sad because their owner has died. So there are many things that we thought belonged only to humans, which belongs to more than one species. But the one thing up to now that we think only us do is the abstract thought and the consciousness, although that is, of course, being challenged by philosophers nowadays. But of course, the most important element of where we have got to, and the one that I can spend days and night uh, thinking about and never get tired, is the quantum world that we are discovering. Because this is something that you cannot even visualize. We're now talking about what reality is, and we're in a serious trouble because we cannot really define it. We do experiments which produces things that cannot happen according to science that we've had until now. Quantum physics is a field of scientific knowledge which is only 100 years old. But in 100 years old, it has got to the stage where now it is on the verge of producing possibly unlimited free energy through fusion energies, and possibly huge artificial intelligence, and possibly quantum computers. Without the fusion, the other two cannot work. If the three happen, if all three happen at the same time, and that is probably more than 50-50 chance that it will be so. And, I'm only a young 86. I expect to be around a few more years and see this happening. What will happen then is that everything that we thought was reality in the entire history of mankind will have to change. That everything that we think about work, about wealth, about how societies, everything we will have to start from zero, because much of our knowledge is description. We describe things that happen. The first time in the history of mankind that we actually did not rely on animal energy, ours or that of animals that we domesticated, was the Victorian Industrial Revolution, which came in two waves of 10 years. What is coming and what is ahead will be, in respect of each of the three things that I have said, tens of thousands of times more disruptive than the Victorian Revolution. And this industrial revolution will not take 10 or 20 years. It will be well below that time scale. So, who I am is a person that doesn't understand why people like color, doesn't understand why people like music, doesn't understand why people want to uh, get so worked up by trying to get a, a, a ball of leather full of air to one end of a room as opposed to the other. So when I'm not trying to understand strange human behavior, then I uh, go back to normal behavior, which is mine. Look, because I think I am a very normal, run-of-the-mill guy with just, a slightly strange bit that not many people understand. Thank you very much.